Good morning, fifth grade. Today for our poetry lesson, we are going to actually be doing poetry. I know we took a little break from that for a little while. We were looking at a debate and we were exposing ourselves to some argumentative writing and seeing what that looks like. But now we're ready to jump back into a new grouping of poems. And this is usually a student favorite, this grouping of poems, because everybody can relate to this grouping of poems. Um, Almost every kid has had a dog or a cat or a pet that he or she adores. A soulmate who listens, loves, comforts, entertains, and never judges. These are the easiest and most relevant love poems for middle school students to read and write. Poets, like just about every other human on the face of the earth, love their pets. I've collected hundreds of poems about cats and dogs, and I've written a few. It's easy to fall in love with a pet, and it's satisfying, fun, and easy to write a love poem about that relationship. We'll start with two love poems to dogs. The first was written a few years ago by Billy Collins, an American and our former poet laureate. The second, written by British poet Siegfried Sassoon, and it's almost 100 years old. The voices, styles, sentiments, and techniques are worlds apart, but the subjects are the same: a dog and his man. It'll be helpful for you to know that Dharma isn't the name of Billy Collins' dog. Dharma is a word from Sanskrit, which means someone's essential spiritual state. At a reading, Collins introduced the poem by saying it was an attempt to investigate the spiritual possibilities of this creature, his dog. So he doesn't just think of him as an animal, he thinks of him as much more than that. And that's what that statement reveals. So let's just jump in, and I will read Dharma first, and then we will read Man and Dog. So follow along with me. The way the dog trots out the front door every morning without a hat or an umbrella or the keys to her doghouse never fails to fill the saucer of my heart with milky admiration. Who provides a finer example of a life without encumbrance? Thoreau in his curtainless hut with a single plate, a single spoon? Gandhi with his staff and his holy diapers? Off she goes into the material world with nothing but her brown coat and her modest blue collar, following only her wet nose, the twin portals of her steady breathing, followed only by the plume of her tail. If only she did not shove the cat aside every morning and eat all his food. What a model of self-containment she would be. What a paragon of earthly detachment. If only she were not so eager for a rub behind the ears, so acrobatic in her welcomes. If only I were not her God. All right, I'm going to move my face over here as we read Man and Dog. Who's this alone with stone and sky? It's only my old dog and I. It's only him, it's only me, alone with stone and grass and tree. What share we most, we two together? Smells and awareness of the weather. What is it makes us more than dust? My trust in him, in me his trust. Here's anyhow one decent thing that life to man and dog can bring. One decent thing remultiplied till Earth's last dog and man have died. All right, kiddos, I'm going to scooch over here. And before we jump in and I tell you what I would like for you to analyze for, I kind of just want to talk about some things that I noticed that I'd like to bring your attention to also. So first of all, let's start with Dharma. When we look at these lines here, where it says without a hat or an umbrella or keys to her doghouse, never fails to fill the saucer of my heart with milky admiration. It's important to understand that right here, Billy Collins is using humor. He's kind of being silly about the way that the dog just walks out the door every morning, carefree, not worried about whether she has her hat or umbrella or the keys to her doghouse. So he's kind of admiring this kind of life that she leads. And then he's also using a metaphor here where he says, fills the saucer of my heart. Obviously, he's saying, he loves his dog, but when he's telling you that he loves his dog, he's comparing his heart to a saucer of milk, and which is sometimes fed to dogs or cats. And so he's saying that his heart is as full as a saucer of milk. This is a metaphor, and it says with milky admiration, and so that's kind of where that comes in. So he was using words to be funny, and he was using words to be descriptive, to be able to say that he loves his dog without saying that he loves his dog in a ordinary, regular way. So his words are more powerful. It kind of lets you know that his heart is full, and he's using a metaphor that will relate to the life of a dog or a cat to do that. And then down here in this stanza, virtue is like his goodness, okay? So he's comparing his dog's goodness or his morals and ethics and just his character in general. He is comparing that to two famous people. Thoreau, who was a famous writer who chose to lead a simple life and write about the beauty of nature, and he didn't need a whole lot. He just went and lived in a cabin in the woods and didn't take a lot of material things with him, and all he needed was nature and the inspiration that nature provided. And then he's also comparing his dog to Gandhi. You can see that here, and we actually talked about this in our selection yesterday out of Scope, the space rock. We had a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, and I told you guys then that he is known for bringing peace to his part of the world. He actually earned a Nobel Peace Prize, and so he's comparing his dog's character to that of Gandhi and Thoreau. So he doesn't need much, and he's a selfless kind of dog, and he wants peace. And then you also see some more of that humor here in this last line where it says Gandhi with his staff and holy diapers. It's important to know that Gandhi was from a part of the country where the way that they dressed was like with something that was similar to a toga or some coverings on the lower part of their body. And so he's making a joke about what Gandhi would wear. He's calling it a holy diaper, but it really wasn't. It was just how people in that part of the country, or not country, part of the world dressed. Okay, so he's telling us my dog doesn't need a lot, and I love my dog. And then in the second stanza, he's comparing his dog's character to two people who are known for kind of being minimalists and putting the main things, letting the main things be the main things in their life, like not getting caught up in material things, focusing on nature, focusing on peace, and serving others. Those are the kind of people he's comparing his dog to in that stanza. And then if we look at this next stanza, he really hits us with some pretty descriptive visual details. So now, after those two stanzas, we have kind of an idea of the dog's personality. Now we're getting some visual details in this stanza to allow us to see what the dog looks like. So it says, off she goes into the material world with nothing but her brown coat. So that's visual. And her modest blue collar. That's visual. It's not fancy. It's just blue. So we know she's brown. We know she wears a blue collar. Following only her wet nose. the twin portals of her steady breathing, followed only by the plume of her tail. So whatever kind of dog she is, she's got a bushy tail. So we get some ideas about kind of what she looks like and a little bit of how she moves. Then we go to the last stanza, and the tone of this piece shifts. So these first three stanzas were expressing his admiration and telling us about her finest qualities, her character, her lack of needing material things. And now he's being silly, but he's talking about all of her drawbacks, okay? And it's kind of a contradiction because he was talking about how selfless she was and how she didn't depend on material things in the stanzas before. But then in this last stanza, the tone shifts and he uses some repetition too. You can see if only, oops, didn't mean to do that. If only and if only right here. So we see, if only she did not shove the cat aside every morning. That's not a very selfless act, is it? Which is what he told us she was earlier by comparing her to Gandhi and saying, that she didn't depend on material things and eats all of his food. What a model of self-containment she would be. So if only she didn't do this, she would be, the model of self-control and all those things I said she was in the first few stanzas. What a paragon of earthly detachment. So he's just being silly here, saying she would, be very much like those two people he talked about. If only she were not so eager for a rub behind the ears. So again, that's not a selfless act. He's like, come on, give me a scratch. So acrobatic in her welcomes. And I think this allows us to see the dog, how excited the dog is when he gets home. I know my schnauzers, that's the first thing they do. We call it the little schnauzer greeting. They have to jump up and touch you with both of their paws. If they don't do that, they haven't properly said hello and welcome back. And so it kind of implies that something of that nature is going on when he comes home. And it says, if only I were not her God. And by pointing that out or framing it that way, he is saying that she depends on me, like I am her whole world. And if you think about your relationship with your pets, that's kind of how that works. Okay, so then I want to jump over here to man and dog, and I promise to try and be a little quicker here. I wanted to point out, you guys probably noticed this when I was reading, that we have rhyming couplets. We have 4-line stanzas that rhyme, and so those are called rhyming couplets because these 2 lines rhyme and these 2 lines rhyme. And so that's a technique that's being used there, which is not something that we often see in free verse poetry, but you have to remember what I told you at the beginning, that this poem, Man and Dog, is over 100 years old. So free verse poetry probably wasn't a thing there, but couplets definitely were. Then I want to point out that it says, it's only my old dog and I, and it's only him, it's only me. This is a pretty important statement in this poem because it's showing his devotion to his dog, but it's also showing the dog's devotion to him. And then that he also mentions that here, my trust in him, in me, his trust. So the way that they depend on each other, the way that they trust each other. And then we notice down here, this last stanza, it's really talking about loyalty between the two. Here's anyhow one decent thing that life to man and dog can bring. One decent thing remultiplied till earth's last dog and man have died. This shows that they will be loyal to each other until the end of time. And if you think about the saying, a dog is a man's best friend, that relationship has kind of been around and referenced for a very, very long time. So it's something that is well known by people, And it's just reiterated here. Like I told you, this poem is over 100 years old. So, a loyalty between a man and his dog is not a new concept. It's been around for a very long time. And I think if we're honest about this, this is really why this grouping of poems is probably such a favorite, because we can all relate to having those kinds of relationships with our pets. So that's it for what I wanted to draw your attention for. But what I want you to do today, so for the response stance, when you go back into this poem, what I would like for you to do is to go back into one of them. You don't have to go back into both, just choose one. But I want you to add 2 or 3 comments to show the lines that you like, the language, and the perspectives that appeal to you. So basically, you're adding comments about the things that you can relate to, or the things that you liked, or the way that the poet used language to demonstrate those relationships. So 3 comments: things you liked, things you can relate to, something that you liked the way the poet showed the reader that relationship. Okay, and I'm looking for 3. You can go into only one. So choose which one you want to go in, and then post 3 comments for me. And then last but not least, I know we're not working on our own poems right now, but we're getting very close to being able to do that again. And so I want you to think about your attitude as a poet toward your dog or cat or pet. Are you an observer like Collins, or a partner like Sassoon? Or sometimes one and sometimes the other? All right, guys. So go ahead and make those comments on your copy and then hand that in. And I love and miss you. I hope you're having a good day. I hope this virtual school isn't getting you down too much. I cannot wait to see your faces in this classroom when it's safe for us to be here again. Love and miss you guys.